Great. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the July 27th Ed Standards Committee meeting. And we have a lot to cover today. Excited to have a lot of things to talk about regarding literacy. And excited to be joined by Miss Honor. Mr. Zhu, should we start with Miss Honor so that she doesn't have to stay for the full meeting? Okay, great. Well, Miss Honor, thank you so much for joining us. If we could actually start then with your update and get your questions and give us a chance to ask you some of ours, that would be great. And then it can be optional if you stay or not, rather than forced.
Okay, well, thank you guys so much for having me. Unfortunately, my counterpart, Kamal, she's a teacher at school and she has back to school night tonight, so she's not able to be with us, but I'm here and just want to make sure we're going in the right direction. I know our semester's ending. August 10th is our actual presentation date, so just want to get you guys' feedback. I will share my screen and go through. As I'm going through, please feel free to interject or interrupt me as well if you have something that you'd like to point out. But again, and actually I'll go ahead and start sharing because it'll segue me right into it. One second. All right, so I'm going to share this presentation and just start really with our research outcomes. So I've put that we partner with the DC State Board of Education to research on literacy and professional developments in DC and states that have proven to have successful literacy strategies and trainings. So one of our outcomes was to develop an outreach and survey to reach DC-based reading specialists, instructors, and educators on the topics of reading and early literacy instruction. So that's the first deliverable. And then the second was to provide a crosswalk that assesses the different literacy and professional development trainings that teachers, coaches, and aides are taking in the states of Alabama, Colorado, Michigan, Louisiana, North Carolina, and Mississippi. So we're also going to provide, if the trainings are mandatory, who covers the cost of these trainings, and then there's also third grade reading proficiency and growth rates in each state, because we know that third grade really determines how successful a student can be, those reading scores. So that's just to hit on those outcomes. I really don't need to go over the goal of research, but where we're at now, so this part right here, I just wanted to put up the actual survey questions that we had. And I know we're taking a survey, we try to take into consideration time and how willing people are to sit there and go through and answer questions and do short answer and things like that. But the first 5 questions are just, what is your name? What school do you currently work at? What is your role at your school? And then how many years have you been in education? And then it moves into the more in-depth questions, such as how many mandatory professional developments were you required to take each quarter of the school year? And you'll see a lot of these are short answer questions because we want to be specific. Of the professional developments you had taken, how many were based in literacy and reading? In what ways would having professional developments on literacy reading benefit you? Do you feel like mandatory state professional development in literacy will be effective for you? And then what are some of your classroom struggles when it comes to teaching literacy and reading comprehension? And then the last set of questions, how supported do you feel by your school district when it comes to literacy-based professional developments? And we'll probably change that up a little bit just to have it on the Likert scale, but we do have 1 through 5. Do any of your students receive support outside of school, such as tutoring or mentorship? What do literacy reading professional developments look like? Are you more or less likely to attend professional development trainings in literacy if they're hosted online? Are state and federal funds a determining factor for you to partake in professional development in literacy? And then lastly, is there any additional information you would like to add to shed light on early literacy needs in DC? So this survey is strictly just for the District of Columbia, not any other state. Again, just to gain some understanding on what literacy looks like in DC's schools. So that's the first part. The second part, oh, I'm sorry, excuse me. I spoke with Mrs. Helen Bear actually this morning who's the new director of the DC Reading Clinic. She's been in this role for about 2 months. So we really had a great interview and conversation. I just, for lack of time, I didn't really get to go through and filter out everything like I wanted to, because I just typed as she talked to me, but I just put the questions up here so you guys could have an understanding. Now, I do have the link of the interview if you wanted to see it. It's just not as filtered as I like it to be right now. But just some of the questions I asked her, these were the questions that you guys see. I got a really good understanding of where literacy is going in DC. She just really broke down how the clinic works and how it's training teachers, ways we can do a better job of helping students in K through 5th grade with literacy, how families can be more involved in their students' education, and just really understanding DC's literacy landscape. So I would pretty much say we're going to use this information from this interview to kind of set up or like segue as we go into how comparing DC with other states. So a very helpful interview that I had this morning with her today. And then moving into the literacy crosswalk question. So just working, Alexander and Giselle have helped us. We're just working, trying to figure out, okay, how can we pinpoint and ask the right questions to get the best information? These are the 5 questions that we chose with the states of Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, Michigan, Colorado, and North Carolina. Pretty much, we have these states, they were suggested to us, and they pretty much all have in training. Most of them have the letters training, and there is a high focus in literacy. So the first question, what literacy PDs and or trainings are offered in your state? The second, what percentage of teachers, school-based literacy coaches, aides, and or school leadership are taking PDs and trainings? The third, are literacy PDs and trainings required by the state, city, and or school districts? The fourth, are the cost of literacy PDs trainings covered by the state, city, and or school districts? And then lastly, what are the 3rd grade reading proficiency and growth rates? So we've literally been researching to get this information from each of these states. We've been successful with Alabama, and I'll kind of go through Alabama, Louisiana, and Mississippi with trying to gain answers to these questions. And then we also are going to, Michigan is one that's kind of been on hold right now. I've reached out and Kamal has reached out to some contacts. We're just waiting to get back more information specifically from them with answering the questions, but we do have information in our Crosswalk, which is a separate document I can give to you guys. Colorado, we actually speak with them, the literacy program supervisor, tomorrow at 1. And then I actually speak with Amy Bryan, who's the director over the Office of Early Learning, tonight at 6 p.m. As well. So just trying to fill in some more gaps with the information. And actually, I'll share the crosswalk that we are putting together. The final product won't quite look like this, but we've been doing this it'll be more of a brochure, just for our research purposes right now, just going through and literally filling in information as we get the answers for each of the different states that we've researched so far. So this is where a lot of our information is housed as well. And I didn't put share. So I say all that to say that's where we're at in our research, just to kind of wrap up where we're at as well. Some states like Alabama, who have seen drastic improvements in reading, are creating teams tasked with making continuous improvements in literacy. Other places we researched, most are using state funds to provide professional development programs for teachers while simultaneously collaborating efforts with state public teacher preparation programs. And then some states like Mississippi have online resources for infants through 5th grade and SEL support to help supplement parents and family members at home with literacy. And then lastly, we're just learning so much about the letters training, which pretty much every state that offers it. It is optional. Most states are really pushing for their teachers to take it in the classroom, but it has proven to be effective as well. So our final deliverables will be, again, that survey, which we're still tweaking, but it'll be a mix of quantitative and qualitative survey, a highlight of how literacy looks in DC schools, and then a brochure that's going to showcase the 5 questions we asked each state department and any additional literacy campaigns they're implementing statewide. So I'll stop my share right there. And that's just really where we're at. So again, I'm open to, and I'm sorry, I didn't see any, see that was in the chat, but open to any questions, suggestions, or anything you guys have.
Alistair, do you want us to just jump in?
Please, yeah, just jump in. Yep.
So first of all, I thought that was all terrific. Thank you so much. It really has gone quite a distance and it's going to be super helpful. I have, is it appropriate to raise some suggestions or additions for the survey? Is this a place to do that, or are we past that point? Yeah.
Oh no, we can always alter the survey.
Okay. So I thought it had just the right shape. I wouldn't only ask about mandatory PD, because sometimes it's mandatory, sometimes it's not. Certainly with in the reading space, I would want to know if they were taking PD, even if it wasn't mandatory. And plus it's hard to define, like maybe I have a mandatory PD next Wednesday and I have 5 choices. I took reading, is that mandatory or voluntary? So, but I just want to know how much they've had. And then there's a set of questions that I would like to know that it's sort of like this. Do you feel knowledgeable to conduct, I think the word would be screenings, to determine whether or not a student needs more support? And then do they have the time to do it, to conduct those screenings for all students? Do they have the materials to do it? Do they have the classroom support to do it? And how often do they actually do it? And then a similar set for whoever in a school is the interventionist, which is sort of like, I mean, and then actually I'd ask them, is there someone in your school who's capable of providing intervention if students turn out to be far behind in reading? And then maybe we could even interview those people and find out, do they know what they're doing? You know, how are they trained? How often do they see people? How is that all decided? That would really give us a picture of sort of how this is working out in the schools, and either it's great or it's a long way to go or where in between. So that's my
Thank you.
I thought it was a great, sort of a great structure for it.
Thank you. I'm typing as you guys are talking, so thank you for that addition as well. And I do see someone asked, do we know Ms. Barrett's background from before she joined the clinic? Honestly, I did not ask. I know she's on LinkedIn. I saw her profile briefly, but I didn't go into what her specific background was.
Representative Parker.
Yeah, I agree. That was great and really helpful. Knowing that some of these states have varying accountability systems, I would just like to know how that merges with the trainings, if at all, and if there are any like tailored trainings for either longer tenured educators or educators that may have like a high number of students that are not meeting grade level expectations. So it's my understanding that Mississippi is doing the 3rd grade benchmark testing that you can't pass if you're not reading on grade level. Correct me if that's not still the case. And so like, how does that influence the training, if at all, that teachers receive would be the question.
Okay, that's good.
And maybe it doesn't, but it would just be helpful to see how they're bringing in the accountability system.
Okay, so merging the accountability system with pretty much PDs are mandatory, and then how long you've been teaching and stuff like that. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. It's great. Can I just ask, just from your perspective, was there anything that was eye-opening that you learned from the conversations with folk? And I know some of them are still ongoing.
I don't necessarily say because I am a 8th grade ELA teacher in North Carolina who teaches reading ELA. So I think some things are just common, I don't know, common nature to me, or nothing that like necessarily stood out. I will say that just hearing Ms. Barrett talk today with the DC Reading Clinic and the push that DC has for literacy, like her talking about how they have 2 options where you can have your students tutored at the clinic. The clinic does like a practicum, and I'm a former TFA, Teach for America, where I work on staff with them during the summer. We do practicum. And so just hearing the push and all the initiatives that they were doing was like refreshing to, oh yes, it was refreshing to hear as well, but the gains that they're trying to make towards literacy. So I just think that everyone's trying to move. I feel like everyone everywhere is saying the same thing. Literacy is an issue. How can we tackle this? Teachers are not trained. What can we do about this? There's a high teacher turnover. How can we keep teachers in the classroom? Just a lot of the same things in a lot of the same places.
Representative Parker, does that answer your question?
Thank you.
So
Yes.
on that, Ms. Honor, I think part of the research that, if I remember right, we spoke about in one of our earlier conversations with this group, was also looking at some more contextual research as well. And so in that particular instance, right, with the DC Reading Clinic as an example, the number or percentage of students that they serve a year relative to like the other states would also just be really helpful context for us, right? Not just, you know, who gets to participate and how are they finding it, but also just quantity of folks who are getting the training relative to other states. If that's something you could weave into your analysis of the states, we would find super helpful as well.
Okay.
Do you have a general sense from what you're finding so far on that? Is that something you've already looked at?
As far as I think numbers is the hardest, maybe one of the hardest pieces to get with this research. I can go back and ask. It's just for someone to give me I can look back. I know we have numbers in our research, but just for someone to say, okay, like this percent, it's just been, well, these teachers at this district, or it's kind of been more well, they have the option to do this, that, and the third. So I think numbers maybe has been a struggle with quantifying, looking at it from a state level versus like a district level. Because we did look at district, but we didn't think, we started the project that way. We didn't think it was as effective. So that's why we moved bigger to state to get better information. But then when we're talking to these state reps or whoever, I know sometimes it's hard to say straight up, can you give me a percent? Well, can you give me a number? I probably could do better with percent. So that's something we can go back in, again, as you said, weave into the project. And I know I have, like I said, I have the conversation at 6 tonight with Ms. Ryan. So I will definitely try to be very specific about, can you give me a percentage of?
That would be great. And Representative Lundberg.
Yeah, so the other set of questions that I would be very interested in is, one of the issues in reading is, on the one hand, we want lots of time spent on reading, and on the other hand, we don't want too much time taken away from science and social studies because kids need the background knowledge. So I'm thinking that one of the things that could be asked of these teachers that would be great, and it would really intersect with and maybe replace something that's going on in our WRE, anyway, the other study, but well-rounded education, to ask, how many minutes a day do they teach reading? How many minutes a day do they teach math? I mean, I'm assuming this is mainly elementary teachers. I would recommend that,
Yeah.
So that we're asking, how many minutes a day do you teach reading? How many minutes a day do you teach math? How many minutes a day do you do social studies and science? And we'd really end up with just a very good picture of what's happening, and we could look at it across wards. I think that would be really great.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. I added that as well, that question as well, because I didn't even think about it from that perspective. Thank you.
And just to kind of weave it all together, Ms. Honor, I think there are a lot of questions here, right? And so when you actually put the report together, defer to you on where you want to focus. But I will say one of the main questions we've been asking here is pulling from what Representative Wattenberg and Representative Parker named. So, how does the training, right? We're talking a lot about a professional development, align with screeners, align with accountability, align with curriculum, right? And if we're talking about professional development for educators or teachers, right? How does that align then with training for administrators? Because a lot of teachers I've spoken to who came out of the DC Reading Clinic said that they weren't authorized to apply what they learned, in their schools.
Mm.
Right? And so, is that a one-off? Is that a 10-off? Is that a universal? Is that a very prevalent problem? How do we resolve that? How do other states resolve that? How do we actually tie it all together is, I think, a very macro level question for us. And as much as you could chip away at that, I think would be really helpful for DC.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Do you have any questions for us?
No, thank you. This has definitely been helpful. And I think you guys are getting help guide us to where we're trying to go with this research. So that's all. I just appreciate you guys' time and expertise and everything.
Thanks so much. Well, you're welcome to stay. We're going to get into some nitty-gritty stuff around our work. But if not, thank you for joining us, and looking forward to hearing from you next.
All right. Thank you guys. Have a great afternoon, evening.
Thanks.
Bye.
So I want to move back to our agenda around Mr. Hugh, would it be okay if I ask folks in the committee to take one more look at the document linked here? And just recenter us around the purpose. It's a lot of questions that I've been getting, and I think some of you have also been getting around more like an FAQ fact sheet that I think we need to at least I want to be able to have coherent answers around. And so Representative Wattenberg has put in her feedback, would love everyone else's groups we've missed. There's no way it's going to be comprehensive, right? But at least to get the conversation started, and would love to be able to use that as part of our more of our constituent engagement work, to be able to cite something that we have done to be able to help families answer these questions. I'm not asking for feedback on this conversation unless if you have some, Representative Wattenberg, but to rather note it in the document for our next meeting, and then we can finalize it and distribute it would be my goal. And it probably not necessarily a distribution in the sense of like mailing it or anything, but just have in our back pocket to share whenever people have these questions, and to be able to cite when it comes up. Mr. Zhu?
Yeah, so two things on that, Representative Chang. One, I would make the suggestion that we try to kind of bring this to kind of a more final place before our next committee meeting. I think our next committee meeting will likely not be till September. I imagine that you all are not going to meet in August, but that could change. And I also think it would be in the committee's best interest to take this document and, to your point, Representative Chang, like literally have it in our back pocket. It's like trying to get some sort of tangible paper form created as well. And I'd love to do that before the end of the current fiscal year too, which is September 30th. And so just with those things in mind, it might make sense to do some of this discussion and dialogue related to the document offline and just like in the document, and then maybe work to finalize it via email so that we can kind of take it to final before the end of the fiscal year, if that makes sense. Or
it does, and I think it's what's challenging about this, I will name, and maybe this is what we do discuss now, is to provide a answer that guides where you can get more resources to answer the question more fully based on what we know. One of the things you all know that I've spoken to now 3 digits of reading instructors in the city, and one of the things that has come up repeatedly is a lot of the parents did not know that their kids were not reading at grade level, based on just however assessments or screeners were communicated to them. It wasn't highlighted that they're off track, and so for a lot of the reading instructors I spoke to, at least when they shared that one-on-one for the first time, a lot of parents were shocked and then said, what do I do? Right. And so, and if we think about like who is part of that group, that's 70% of our kids, right? So I think the denominator is quite large there. What we could also be helping to gather, and a lot of these answers, at least resources, were gathered from those reading instructors, is to at least be able to give them something, that equip them with something too, that they can provide those parents. And at the same time, we don't want this to be a 20-page document or a 126-page document like the Comprehensive Literacy Plan, which overviews this whole thing, right? So I think the tension between, and this is where I would love your feedback, the tension between being comprehensive and being, you know, just providing some guideposts. And we can always cite, I think, I can always think of one reading instructor who has told me one of these resources at this point that we can cite and say it was recommended by reading instructors, currently active reading instructors in the city. And these are all questions that have actually, they've received and I've received. So to be able to kind of pull some of that information together. And then also thinking through, as you go through it, what can we cut to make it be able to fit on a front back one pager. And in that case, given what you've named, Mr. Zhu, would folks on the committee be willing to have a final look by next Wednesday? And so for our working session, it's due, your review is due that day, and then we'll take a final stab at it and send it out for a final review. Rep. Wattenberg.
Yeah, so when I read this, you can see it sort of in these comments is, and I think this echoes a little bit what you're saying, Alistair, is it's a little bit for teachers and it's a little bit for parents. And I'll tell you, I mean, my sense as a recent parent of kids in this situation and talking to them and hearing them testify, you know, this is not what parents need so much. I mean, it's a problem. I mean, I don't know what they need is, as you say, for their kids to get screened. And if there's a problem, that something gets done about it. And at some level, what they need is something that helps them make that happen. And I don't know that we're in a position to do that. So I don't have a solution, but I do think that's an issue. I mean, I just think, yeah. I mean, I wonder what does the ombudsman do when parents come and say, you know, my child's in 4th grade and I just found out that they're not reading, or if a parent comes and says my child's in 2nd grade and not reading. I mean,
yeah. And I have not asked, and I will. And actually, Mr. Zhu, if I could get your help to do that, that would be amazing. But what I do know when I've asked around is that there is no other navigating guide like this around literacy for DC right now, right? And so there is no even list of literacy nonprofits in the city.
and that's useful. I agree.
So
And maybe that's the thing to say, is that it's here's a list of nonprofits you can go to here.
Yeah, and I get that too, right? It's more of a as the conveners, when we think about our role as the conveners and as far as constituent engagement goes around education, I do think that role falls on us. And if we see a gap there, and I do think what I hear from what you've just said is that we need to be clear on who the audience is. I would like this to be more for our constituents, being parents and families, than it is for teachers. So if we can simplify, what I take from that is simplify the language, make it clearer for families who are trying to navigate this, but even then it's too complicated. So it's something that, again, I'd love everyone's feedback on. And if we decide, hey, this is not worth it, it's not actually going to be useful for families, we'll scrap it. And if we think it's something we can at least have a PDF of and keep in our back pocket for when questions like this arise, then I think it's worth keeping.
Yeah, Alistair, I agree that it should be parent focused. or as you put constituent focus, which I read as parent focus. And I started going through providing edits. Right now, it reads heavily along the what, like what are the assessments or what are the resources? And I think if we frame this more around like, what should they be doing with those? So for instance, at the top, like here are the assessments your child is likely taking at school. Here are some questions you should be asking your teacher or principal to gauge how your student is performing on grade level, for instance. I think that might be really helpful to the average parent versus just knowing the what, if that makes sense. And I can take a stab at trying to orient to some of those questions, but just throwing that out there.
And I mean, the hard one is, and what do you do if your child is behind on those tests? I mean, I think that's a good idea actually to find out where are your kids on those tests, on those basic tests. And if they're behind, what do you do?
Yeah.
So.
Right.
And can I say one other thing is it may be worth sort of thinking of this as sort of two questions, you know, for children that are proceeding reasonably well, and for all children for that matter, there are things you can do at home that just are helpful, you know, reading all the time, all these different sites, you know, things to do. But if your child's reading is behind, this is really not adequate. And that's a lot of who we're hearing from and who we need to be able to say something to, that you need to do more than this. You need to get your school on the case somehow.
Which is inaccessible for a lot of parents, I will say, right? So then, you know, that's where I think we can list ombudsman and student advocate's office as resources, right? Or even just like, if that is the case, turn to us, reach out to us and we'll help you navigate it further, right? And
well, except I mean, I'd like to hear what the ombudsman and advocate do. I mean, I guess part of what I'm saying is, I mean, part of our role is to understand the limitations. I mean, we're not in a position to get this stuff done. And part of what we need to do is sort of, and I mean, I think part of what you're trying to get the board to do through this project is to be able to put some pressure, apply some pressure on the system to say, we need to move further in this direction. And insofar as we have people explaining to us, yes, I went to the school, I asked for some support, I didn't get any, it helps us know what's needed. Does that make sense?
it does, and it is a whole, I like the way that Representative Parker framed it around here, the questions you should be asking, right? Because there's no way in these 2 pages we can explain Dibbles and interpret it yourself, or explain what it means to actually get proficient on NAEP, right? And how you know you're on track to do that or not. And so rather, right, here are the best practices or promising practices around keep an eye out for these assessments, keep and make sure you understand, you know, ask your teacher what that means, right? And I think that would also just make a lot of the reading instructors I spoke to feel better about it, because I think often they get surprised when well, especially during the pandemic. I was talking to someone yesterday, a reading instructor, about this yesterday, and she was saying that one of her parents said that she thinks that virtual was going super, and she was like, how do you define super, right? Like super being like this kid was able to sit in front of a screen and pay attention the whole day, because this kid has missed 2 reading grades now. And so, you know, how do we make sure that isn't a surprise then when NAEP comes around and you're like, oh wow, like you know, my child is really now deeply behind, is also a concern for the reading instructors, right? So I will take yeah, that's a fair note, Rep. Wattenberg. I will take your comments next week and do a revised version around this. And hi, Rep. Bernstedt, good to see you. I would love your feedback on this as well. So I'll copy it again. And just a quick summary, we want to make sure that it is simplified, framed more clearly for families and how to navigate the system. and shorten it to 2 pages. And then have this, again, come back. I do want to come back to this conversation of whatever that final product is. Is it even useful? I know the problem. I can state the problem. It's hard for me to come up with a short solution that's not a systemic solution like you are mentioning, Brett Bottenberg, but I do think there's low-hanging, like, help navigation fruit. I'm mixing metaphors here. That might work. Okay, so
Maybe even saying that clarifies it, just to sort of say, we need some improvement in the way our schools are required to handle this, and we're doing that. Meanwhile, this is what you can do. Maybe that helps.
Yeah. Okay, I'll reword that. Great, thank you. And Rep. Wattenberg, thank you for staying. I know you've got to run, but if you can stay, it'd be great. We're gonna I'm gonna pass to Mr. Zhu to give a quick update on the NASB Early Literacy Work Group.
Can I say one thing about this standards position? Or actually, maybe I don't, never mind. I thought it was great. I thought it was a great job description, whoever did it. And that I love the way it also allowed for that person to do some research on the side. So that's all I wanted to say on it, I think.
Great.
Wish I could stay. Got to go. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you very much. And thanks to all of you who made this happen. Bye.
Bye.
Representative Chang, I'm going to pass to just Giselle because I think she was going to provide the update on the NASB literacy. I do think Representative Parker said that he may try to rejoin from another device, but I think we should continue anyways. So Giselle.
Thanks, Alex. So not a big update when it comes to the NASB Early Literacy Work Group. There was an email that NASB sent that had recent research, news stories, and policy developments around early childhood education and early literacy. And so that's something that I'll go ahead and forward to all the committee members so that you have that information. And if you're curious, you can check out those different news articles. And then I think the other piece that's important to mention is that the next working group meeting is going to be on September 22nd at 4 p.m. And then the following meeting will be an in-person meeting at the NASB annual conference in October. So those are 2 upcoming meetings, and I think that's it. So I'll go ahead and pass it back to you, Alistair.
Thank you so much, and appreciate you stepping up to represent DC. So we'll pass. We'll move over now to standards revision and. Well, I guess this the literacy roundtable. If we may, instead of overviewing what happened, I'd be curious to hear from the team if there's any next steps that you think we should take on.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway was when Chairman Mendelson expressed interest, or he actually asked President Sutter if the committee of the whole should codify a standards revision process. So that's something that we've been working on as a committee. And President Sutter responded with saying, first we should develop the process, test it out on a set of standards, and if it works, then we should codify that. And so I thought that was an awesome answer and exciting that he's expressing interest. So I was actually going to turn to the committee and ask if there's any next steps we should take from there, if there's something that we could do proactively, should that conversation come up again. But other than that, that's the update for the literacy roundtable.
I actually like how that dovetails with the resolution that Vice President Thompson put forward around having this be, we reconsider this every 2 years. And, I'm not ready to come up with a literacy standard for tomorrow. I am ready to think about how we are developing a pilot around that, right? Let's say as part of our 2-year assessment that we do, reassessment that we do with OSSI, Does that make sense to you all who know the system better than I do?
Well, I mean, I guess Representative Chang, I think the first thing I would say is that like there really isn't a system right now. And I think that is the big issue, right? Like there really is not. And going through the social studies revision process is like our first attempt at developing some sort of system or process. And so I think to the comments that President Sutter made when Chairman Mendelson asked her, you know, about codification, you know, I think we do need to see like, okay, we really need to do an after action plan once the social studies standards have been fully revised and say like, okay, it took us X number of years to do, these were the different phases that we went through to revise the social studies standards. What worked well, what didn't work well, what should be changed, what could be shortened, et cetera. And I think from there, I think the next big question would be, do we apply that same process to a new set moving forward and test it out, you know, next year? Or do we bring that process forward to council for the possibility of codification?
Okay. And within that timeline and framework, I would be interested in proposing that we recommend that literacy as a part of that. So I don't know if that fits, and it's not quite a, it doesn't fit an existing bucket of standards we've got, right? So maybe it's not a revision per se. Do you see anywhere where literacy fits in, or are you saying this is more about taking the buckets of standards that we currently have? I think I'm just a little confused because it's part of the literacy roundtable update. But is it what the way that Jessica, President Sutter answered, is that part of a revise the existing buckets or revise the whole thing?
So I think it's my understanding that Chairman Mendelson, he asked this question at the literacy roundtable, but kind of brought it out of the sense of like literacy
right
as a topic and was just asking as a whole, like when it comes to our standards, how are they revised? How should they be revised? Should we codify a process?
Got it. Okay.
Of literacy in particular.
Well, you know who is particularly uniquely qualified to answer this question is Representative Bernstadt, who convened a panel on this and did a little research on it at least. Do you have a strong stance on this or how we might proceed this next year that you're with us?
I think Giselle might be able to answer that question a little bit better, but I think it's worth, I agree with what President Sutter said, that we should probably try something out and see how it works, but that process is going to take a while. Or that process, or we use the social study standards revision process, see how long that takes, note that might take longer than other things, and then see moving forward if we can use what we learned from that into something.
Okay, so I think, Mr. Zhu, if we could take this one as a cross-committee conversation, I think it's actually also, it's not just an ed standards conversation, right? I think it's also a governance question too, because in many ways it's fitting under, well, maybe it is our work.
Can I provide a little bit more context as to how that got raised at the roundtable? So Chairman Mendelson, during the government Q&A, he brought up testimony from a public witness. Her name's Molly France. And in her testimony, she pretty much said that early learning standards were last revised in 2019, and they leave large gaps between what pre-K students should know and when they enter kindergarten. The learning standards and expectations are just, there's way too big of a gap there. And so she works within the public charter schools, and she raised that as a concern. And that's when Chairman Mendelson brought up, well, how often are we revising standards? And that's the question he directed to President Sutter.
Okay. So, I mean, it's something we've been thinking about. We got student feedback on, and I wonder if two things, if we think about scheduling things for the fall, if we could do another panel that would love to have not just students this time, but others around from states, other states, and in how they codify this, is one proposal, and the second one is a total non sequitur, but seeing if we could also bring Dr. Bear, who's the head of the DC Reading Clinic, in to speak with us all together as well in the fall, would be super. And I think what I don't have a great sense of is because this is not something that we've budgeted for the year, if the staff have time to do a little bit more on this, because this gets really wonky, right? I mean, this is like real policy wonky details around how we codify a standards process, right? And so I want to make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row, if we're even proposing a pilot. And so it may be, right, that we do the prep work as this committee now to be able to pass it over to our standard specialist when they join, and or have it be a part of the work that we budget staff for this next budget cycle, if that makes sense. Okay. I want to move forward. So Dr. Bernstead, someday.
One day.
Representative Bernstead, do you have any feedback on the job description for the standard
No,
specialist?
I do not, but I also haven't had time to review it because I was not in my email. And
Oh, good.
so I
Okay.
didn't get it. I got in recently,
You're
I'm back.
good.
so I wasn't seeing the updates, but I see them.
You're good. You're good. If you think of any, who should Rep Bernstead send it to? Great. To Mr. Xu. And then this miscellaneous point, can someone remind me what we were thinking when we talked about this last around a literacy related presentation?
So before we go there, Representative Chang, do you have any feedback on the standards position at this time?
I think it looks great, actually. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
excited about this role.
All right. So you, I think both between you and Representative Wattenberg have provided some affirmation, which is good. Just by way of process, what will likely happen is once this position is in a more final format, we'll bring it to the admin committee for them to review the description. And then we'll hopefully get it posted sometime in August of this year so that we can bring that person on in October at the start of the new
Cool.
fiscal year.
That's awesome. Great.
So that's
Okay.
the hope and plan. Yes.
Very
Rob?
cool.
If I have any comments, do you want me to send them in an email or can I just add them as a comment on the document?
If you can just add them as a comment into that SharePoint doc, that would be the best.
Okay, if I have any, they'll be there by tomorrow at 9 a.m.
Okay. There's actually, there's no rush if it's end of week, like that's fine too. But
Tomorrow at 9 a.m.
yeah. Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Robert.
Great, thanks. Okay.
Yeah. Perfect. But yeah, back to what you were saying, Representative Chang, about like the miscellaneous thing related to literacy related presentation at the back to school event. So first, just sort of some context for both you and Rep Bernstead. It is likely that the state board will host a like back to school fall engagement session
Great.
on a Saturday in September, either the 10th, the 17th, or the 24th. The date and location are still to be determined, but we're logistically trying to figure that out right now. It is my understanding that advocacy and outreach, assessment and accountability, board governance, and likely this committee will have some sort of engagement session or presentation. And I imagine the session that you might wish to hold Representative Chang could probably be related to two things. One is on literacy, and what that particular topic is at this time, I'm not sure. I mean, one thing that just came to my mind is, right, like we could literally ask families for input on
Oh, I love that.
we
Sorry.
started with at
That's
the
what we're saying.
beginning,
Yeah.
right? Like at the very beginning, like
Yeah.
if your student or if you have a member of your family who is failing or behind when it comes to reading, like what are you looking for? Like we could literally ask them that question and see how we could use those responses to like get the right resources in front of them. I think another possibility that we could do, which would pivot a little bit from literacy, would be a general question around standards process, and to ask folks how they would like to see future standards revised. Are there particular standards that families feel are, totally outdated, in drastic need of revision? Is there a certain order that families might like to see our next standards revised? And so I kind of see the conversation possibly going in either of those two directions, or possibly there could be the opportunity to actually talk about both those things. And that's just based on like my sense of like where the committee is with some work right now, and where we could get some valuable input and engagement on some topics.
Great. Okay, I like that. And so in some ways, then it also, we could call this a draft literacy FAQ that we keep in our back pocket, and even print it still, but I mean, it's a dynamic doc, right? So we could get feedback pass it out at the session and get feedback. I think that would be great.
Okay, perfect. So just to repeat that back, I think we'll use it as an opportunity to get feedback on the FAQ, and then also possibly as an opportunity to talk in the general about standards revision processes.
Great.
And it's like perfect.
And for the record, if I may have a vote, the 10th is the best of those 3 dates for me, but don't schedule it around me.
Yeah, I imagine that everybody will have a good date for them that nobody's will keep the same.
Okay, great. So then I think that's everything in our agenda today. Were there any other things that I missed? Any next steps that you need from me or from Rep. Bernstein?
I do not think so at this time. I do think Rep. Chang, I noted this earlier, but do you want to have a committee meeting in August, or do you want to forego that?
You are all on vacation in August, is that correct? Or are you working?
I mean, we work, but we're attempting to do what we've coined as summer light.
Let's do summer light. We will not have a meeting in August, and we'll meet again in September.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good.
Great. And could I get your help though, just to send an email out to everyone in the committee to remind them?
Yes, I think when we send out the notes from this, we'll make that note for sure.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much. And look forward to talking more in September at the latest. Yeah.
Yes. And leave, yes, it is a miracle.
Yeah.
Miracle. Only one meeting in August, literally.
Hey, did we
We used to
decide
like
total-
6 a month.
Yeah.
And I mean, knock on wood, I do hope that it actually will be a shorter meeting too. I think it will. There's some administrative items that need to be addressed, but knock on wood, I'm going to put it in the earth, and I'm going to like say it out loud, like a meeting that's probably 2 hours or less.
And it's virtual this time.
And it's virtual too.
Okay.
So like all these things that hopefully the stars align for something that works out well for all of us.
Great.
Oh, I will be late because I get out of camp at 5. So I'll join from my phone at like 5:15.
That's okay. Of course. We appreciate you being there, Liv.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rep. Bernstein. And I know you two don't get this enough, but you are amazing, and thank you so much for everything you do for us, and including shepherding in addition to the policy real work. Thank you.
Yeah, I will also just end too, that this will likely, because we're not going to do another August meeting, this will likely be Giselle's last meeting with the committee, which I probably should have said earlier when the other members were here.
Oh,
Giselle has, to your point, Rep. Chang, she has been truly instrumental in a lot of the work that we've done, and
incredible.
Greatly missed when her tenure with the state board ends in a couple of weeks.
Where are you headed, if I may ask?
Well, I'm in San Diego now. I've been here for the past 4 months, so I'm waking up pretty early to stay with those East Coast hours. So I'll be sleeping in a little bit for 2 weeks-ish. And then I am going to be a teacher's aide at an elementary school here in Pacific Beach. I'll be 2 blocks away from the beach, which is really nice.
Oh man, okay. Well, you have a fan club in DC, and so please let us know if you ever come back east. And good luck with that.
Absolutely. Thank you. My family's in the DC area, the DMV, so I'll let you all know through the Slack channel when I'm back, so maybe we can all meet up.
Great. Good luck with next steps,
Thank you so much.
and have a good night, everyone.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.